The halls of Valar Prime Academy gleamed with artificial light, a place of prestige, a sanctuary of knowledge. Here, the brightest minds of the galaxy studied tactics, warfare, and the art of combat. And at the very top of this hierarchy stood Professor Zaltorin. He was a Grellian, a species renowned for its strategic brilliance. He had spent decades studying battle theory, refining the very principles that govern war across the stars. Yet today, he had a different lesson planned. Class, he announced, his voice carrying across the lecture hall. We are honored to host a representative of the human race. The students turned toward the lone figure standing at the center of the chamber, Nathan Carter. He was unremarkable in appearance, by alien standards at least. Average height, lean build, no visible armor or cybernetic enhancements. But his posture was relaxed, too relaxed, as if he was bored. Professor Zaltorin narrowed his eyes. Humanity has built a reputation in the galactic community. Some believe you are formidable warriors. His tone was laced with skepticism. I remain unconvinced. That is why today we shall put this claim to the test. A few chuckles rippled, Ash through the class. The professor gestured toward the simulation chamber. You will face one of my finest students in single combat. Nathan tilted his head. Rules? Standard dueling protocol. First decisive strike wins. Nathan shrugged. All right, Professor? Zaltorin smiled. He had studied humans. They were emotional, reckless, relying on instinct rather than strategy. Against a properly trained opponent, a human's luck would run out quickly. He turned to his best student, Varkan. The chosen warrior stepped forward, a 7-foot tall Mazarian, his body lined with dense muscle and natural armor plating. He wielded a training blade, its energy field shimmering. Nathan remained unimpressed. Begin, the professor commanded. Varkan moved first. A precise, calculated strike, but Nathan was already gone. A blur of motion, impossibly fast. The Mazarian's attack struck only air. The class gasped. Nathan reappeared behind Varkan, his own training sword resting against the warrior's neck. Silence. The head simulation chamber deactivated. The fight was over. Nathan lowered his blade. That it? The professor's smug expression disappeared. Varkan stumbled forward, touching his throat as if unable to process what had happened. This is unacceptable, Zaltorin snapped. Nathan arched an eyebrow. Didn't I follow the rules? The professor refused to accept it. This had to be an anomaly, a fluke. Again, he growled. Nathan sighed. Your call. Another warrior stepped forward. This one faster, more experienced. The result was the same. Nathan didn't just win, he dismantled them. Each strike was calculated, effortless. His movements weren't just fast, they were adaptive. By the time the third opponent fell, the class was no longer amused. Professor Zaltorin clenched his jaw. This was wrong. Humans weren't supposed to be this good. And yet Nathan Carter stood before him, unscathed, calm, unbothered. And for the first time in his career, Professor Zaltorin felt something he never expected to feel toward a human. Fear. Word of the human's victory spread like wildfire. By midday, the Grand Combat Hall of Valar Prime Academy was packed. Students, professors, even military officers, all gathered to witness what should have been impossible. Professor Zaltorin refused to accept it. 1 duel? A fluke. 2? Statistical anomaly. 3? No. There had to be an explanation. If this human truly possessed superior combat skills, then it needed to be demonstrated properly. So the professor did what any self-respecting Grellian tactician would do. He made it a spectacle. Nathan Carter stood in the center of the combat arena, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Across from him, 5 challengers prepared for battle. Not just students this time. These were hand-picked warriors from Valar Prime's elite combat division. A diverse mix of species, each one trained in different forms of battle. Professor Zaltorin addressed the audience. Today we dispel the myth of human superiority. We have heard tales of their so-called resilience, their alleged warrior spirit, but words are nothing without proof. Let this trial serve as a lesson. One species cannot defy the principles of combat mastery. A wave of approving murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathan sighed. "You talk a lot, Professor. Are we doing this or what?" The audience bristled at his tone. Such arrogance. Typical human. Professor Zaltorin raised a hand. "Begin!" The 5 warriors attacked as one. A coordinated assault. No wasted movement. No hesitation. The Mazarian struck first, swinging his blade with enough force to cleave solid stone. Nathan didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped forward. The Mazarian's momentum worked against him. Nathan's blade redirected the strike, guiding it off course by mere inches. And then, counterattack! A single precise motion. The Mazarian's weapon clattered to the floor. Before he could react, Nathan's foot hooked behind his leg and sent him sprawling, one down. The second warrior, a Vithari duelist, came from behind, striking with lightning-fast precision. Nathan sidestepped, just barely. Too fast to block, too close to escape. So he did something unexpected. He moved toward the attack, closing the distance impossibly fast. He grabbed the Vithari's wrist and twisted. A small movement, a slight redirection, but enough. The warrior's own blade came, dangerously close to his own throat. He froze. Nathan tapped him lightly on the chest with his weapon. 2 down. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. The remaining 3 hesitated. Nathan rolled his shoulders. "Come on then!" They rushed him together. The third warrior, a heavily armored Gornak, used brute strength. Nathan went low. Too low for someone his size. He swept the Gornak's legs in a single fluid motion. The warrior collapsed like a falling tower. 3 down, the fourth never had a chance. He was already reacting to the fight as if he'd lost. Nathan saw it in his eyes. A simple feint. A step forward. The fourth warrior flinched before the attack even landed. Nathan didn't bother finishing it. "You already gave up," he muttered. Walking past him, 4 down. The final warrior, a Sarakian twin blade specialist, stood his ground. Nathan studied him. Then he smiled. The Sarakian lunged, blades whipped through the air. Every strike was lightning fast, calculated. The alien moved with machine-like precision. Nathan dodged, not wildly, just enough. Every attack missed by millimeters. The Sarakian started to panic. He was faster, stronger, but it didn't matter. Nathan wasn't reacting to his attacks. He was predicting them. A final swing. Nathan moved first. His blade caught the Sarakian's wrist mid-strike. A flick of his wrist, a subtle twist, and suddenly the twin blades were gone. The Sarakian stared at his empty hands. Nathan casually flipped one of the stolen weapons in his grip. "Nice balance!" Silence. Then uproar. The audience exploded in shock. Professor Zaltorin looked like he'd swallowed a rock. Nathan dropped the twin blades with a loud clatter. "That enough of a lesson for you, Professor?" The grand combat hall was in chaos. Some students argued that it was a trick. Others were in awe. Professor Zaltorin stood frozen. This wasn't just unexpected. It was impossible. Nathan dusted off his sleeves. "Look, I get it. You think humans are unpredictable. That we fight with instinct instead of strategy," he turned to the crowd. "You're wrong." The room fell silent. Nathan gestured to the fallen warriors. "You train with strict techniques, fixed movements. You rely on traditions, patterns, systems. You expect the enemy to follow the same rules." His eyes locked onto Zaltorin. "We don't." That was the lesson today. Not brute strength, not superior speed, not even a single lucky victory. It was adaptation. It was humanity's greatest weapon. And as Nathan Carter walked out of the arena, he left behind an academy full of warriors who suddenly weren't so sure about their own superiority anymore. The silence in the grand combat hall lingered long after Nathan Carter had left. What had just happened shouldn't have been possible. Professor Zaltorin stood stiffly. At the podium, his mind racing. He had spent decades studying theories of combat. Yet in mere minutes, a lone human had shattered everything he thought he knew. But Zaltorin was no fool. This wasn't magic. It was a pattern. Nathan Carter wasn't just strong or fast. He had predicted every move, and predictions could be analyzed. With a sharp motion, Zaltorin turned to his assistant. "Prepare the battle archives. I want a full breakdown of every recorded duel." The assistant hesitated. And Professor, you think, I don't think, I know. This wasn't instinct, it was calculation. The Grelian scholars always prided themselves on their understanding of combat. Every movement, every strike, every counter, all could be quantified. Now, Zaltorin was gonna prove it. Within hours, the Academy's tactical simulation lab was flooded with data. Holoscreens projected footage of Nathan's duels from every possible angle. Every movement was analyzed. Every attack broken down. Zaltorin and his team watched in growing disbelief. At first, the results made sense. Nathan Carter was skilled. His reflexes were above average. His movements efficient. But then, the anomalies appeared. One researcher frowned at the numbers. This isn't possible. Zaltorin turned sharply. Explain! The researcher gestured at a screen filled with combat patterns. Look at his responses. He isn't just reacting quickly, he's reacting before the attack even starts. The room fell silent. Another researcher zoomed in on a slowed down replay of the final duel. Here, the Serakian twin blade specialist. See how he shifts his weight? That's the prelude to a high feint. The simulation highlighted the Serakian's movement frame by frame. Nathan had already moved. Before the feint was fully executed, he was countering it. A pause. Then another researcher murmured, he didn't fall for a single feint. Not one. That shouldn't have been possible. Every species had subconscious tells. Feints worked because even the best fighters had limits. Their nervous system, their muscle memory, all could be exploited. Nathan Carter? He fought as if he could see the future. Professor Zaltorin rubbed his temples. No species was truly unpredictable. Even humans had to follow some kind of logic. So what was the pattern? The answer came from an unlikely source. A junior analyst, a first-year student, timidly raised the hand. Professor? Maybe it's not about reaction time. Maybe it's... She hesitated. A code? Zaltorin frowned. Explain. The student cleared her throat. I study computational warfare theory, and what we're seeing, it reminds me of predictive combat models. She pulled up a new data set. If we isolate only Nathan's responses and remove the alien movements, the screen changed. Nathan's movements alone appeared as a complex but structured algorithm, a pattern that matched something eerily familiar. That? One of the senior analysts stared at the screen. That looks like a prediction model. A highly advanced one that shouldn't exist. Yet Nathan had executed it perfectly, not once, not twice, every single time. The implications were terrifying. Zaltorin felt his throat go dry. Predictive combat was not new. The greatest minds had spent centuries trying to perfect it, but it always had a fatal flaw: chaos. A battle was too unpredictable. Too many factors, too many variables. No system, not even the most advanced AIs, could calculate real-time combat predictions with absolute accuracy. But Nathan Carter, he was doing it instinctively. Zaltorin's voice was low. Are you suggesting that humans have broken the uncertainty principle of combat? The junior analyst hesitated. Not exactly, sir, but... She tapped the screen. They think differently than us. Every species approached battle with predetermined structures. Even the most adaptive. Warriors still followed biological patterns. Humans, however, they didn't just react to an opponent's movements, they anticipated them. They treated combat like a fluid puzzle. They didn't see what was happening. They saw what was about to happen. News spread fast. Within hours, every combat scholar at HFY Prime was talking about it. Theories flew. Some dismissed it as luck. Others argued it was simply superior reflexes, but the data didn't lie. Nathan Carter had done something no known species had ever achieved. The Academy's greatest tacticians pored over the footage trying to decode his methods. Yet the more they analyzed, the more questions arose. Was this unique to Nathan? Or was this just how humans fought? The implications were staggering. Zaltorin stared at the holographic projections long into the night. His mind was still grappling with one final thought. If humans could naturally see combat in a way that no other species could, then perhaps it wasn't just Valar Prime's warriors who had been fighting at a disadvantage. It was the entire galaxy. The halls of Galactic Command had never been so silent. Not even during the Velaryon Uprising. Not even when the Zilthic Armada had threatened the core worlds. But today the silence was heavy. High Chancellor Rithran stood at the head of the War Council, his elongated fingers clenching the edges of the holotable. Before him, a single combat report hovered in the air, analyzed, reanalyzed, and cross-verified 100 times. It all led to one inescapable truth. Humans were different, and that terrified him. These findings are incomplete, Grand Strategist Voklan muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. They are not interrupted. Admiral Girak, his crimson carapace rigid with unease. We have reviewed the footage. We have analyzed every duel, and still we cannot explain it. Across the table, Fleet Marshal Khazer, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, exhaled slowly. There is nothing to explain, he said, voice gruff. The data speaks for itself. Humans do not merely fight, they calculate. The room stiffened. Khazer's eyes flickered toward the glowing combat projections, pausing on a slowed-down frame of Nathan Carter's final duel. The human had moved before the attack had even begun. The Sarakian warrior, one of the Academy's most decorated duelists, hadn't even finished shifting his stance when Nathan had already countered him. There was no hesitation, no delay. Nathan Carter had seen the outcome before the battle had even started. That should not be possible, and yet it had happened. If this ability is common among humans, Grand Strategist Voklan trailed off, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. The thought remained unspoken because the consequences were too horrifying to say aloud. For centuries, the Galactic Council had believed warfare followed a simple principle. It was a contest of strength, technology, and tactics. Every species had limits. Even the most skilled warriors could be outmaneuvered. Even the greatest tacticians could be outthought. But humans? They didn't just fight, they anticipated. They treated battle like a puzzle, like a game of moves and counter moves. And if this was their natural instinct, then no fleet, no army, no war doctrine in the known galaxy could ever truly counter them. We must act. The voice belonged to Supreme Tactician Relthus, a cold and calculating mind who had never once shown emotion in his strategic decisions. But now there was an edge to his voice, a hint of something the Council had never heard from him before. Fear? We must contain them, Relthus continued. We must restrict their access to advanced battle simulations, limit their exposure to multi-species. Combat strategies! Admiral Girak's mandibles clicked sharply. Contain them! His tone was incredulous. You speak as if they are a threat, as if they are an enemy. Relthus turned to him, his voice low. Are they not? The room froze. No one dared answer, because deep down they all knew the truth. Humans had never been a military power in the Galactic Council. They were a minor species, a curiosity at best. But now they understood the real danger. If humans ever became a true interstellar force, if they ever unified their people under a single war banner, then the Galactic Council's fleets, their armies, their entire doctrine of war would not be enough. Chancellor Rithran finally spoke. Begin drafting the restrictions. A single command, a single unspoken admission of fear. Across the galaxy, laws would be passed. Military academies would be restructured. Simulated war games would be limited for human participants. Officially, it would be labeled as necessary security measures, but behind closed doors, the truth remained clear. The Galactic Council had no way to stop the humans, so their only option was to slow them down. For as long as they could, the Galactic Council moved quickly. New regulations were passed. Access to high-level strategic simulations was restricted. Human participation in advanced war games was reduced to observer status. Official reasoning? To promote interspecies cooperation and prevent unnecessary competition. But the real reason? Fear. They had seen the way Nathan Carter fought. They had witnessed how humans didn't just react to combat situations, they predicted them. So the Council believed they could slow them down, limit their growth, force them into a controlled environment. It was a good plan, in theory. The problem was simple. The Galactic Council believed human ability came from external training, that if they restricted access to advanced combat simulations, humans would lose their edge. But that assumption was wrong because human strategy, it wasn't learned. It was ingrained. From childhood, humans played games of strategy and deception, hide and seek, chess, poker, every game, every competition, every childhood scuffle, a lesson in prediction, adaptation, and survival. The council thought that by cutting them off from formal training, they would limit their growth. But humans didn't need training. They thrived in chaos. They adapted. They evolved. And there was no off switch for that. The first warning sign came 6 months later. A routine training exercise to elite Catal shock. Troopers were running combat drills against a human recruit named Ryan Holt. The Catal were built for war, born with natural exoskeletal armor, superior reflexes, and genetically enhanced reaction times. Ryan Holt? Just a standard human. No augmentations, no cybernetics. But the moment the drill started, something went wrong. Ryan didn't move like a trainee. He dodged before the Catal attacked. He countered before they fully committed to a strike. And worse, he smiled while doing it. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. He was reading them, watching for tiny shifts in weight, the smallest muscle twitches, the rhythm of their attacks. The Catal were faster, stronger, but it didn't matter because Ryan Holt already knew how they would lose. It took less than a minute. One Catal went down, then the other. The match was over before it had even begun, and that's when Galactic Command realized their mistake. They hadn't stopped anything. They had only forced the humans to improve in secret. Admiral Jirak read the after-action report twice. He didn't speak, didn't move. When he finally did, his mandibles clicked together in frustration. They didn't even need the simulations, he muttered. Sir, the aide asked. Jirak turned toward the holo display where Ryan Holt's match played in slow motion. They're still getting better. They're still learning, his voice lowered, and we have no way to stop them. Across the room, a group of senior officials remained silent because they all understood the terrifying truth. The plan to contain humanity had failed. The off switch didn't exist, and it never had. The Galactic Council was patient. They had seen it before. A new species would rise too fast, push too hard, and then break. It was a natural cycle. Overconfidence, overreach, collapse. The Thalzek Dominion, the Valkyrie clans, the Aurak expansionists, all of them had burned too bright and crumbled under their own ambition. So they waited for humanity to do the same. They restricted their access to cutting-edge technology, blocked them from high-level strategic decisions, pushed them toward stagnation. And still, the breaking point never came. Humans didn't just endure the restrictions. They thrived under them. Denied access to advanced weapons, they improved the old ones. Cut off from high-level simulations, they built their own, better ones. Limited to observer roles in strategic planning, they predicted every move anyway. They weren't just surviving, they were adapting. Worse still, they weren't growing frustrated or desperate. They were getting smarter, more unpredictable, more dangerous. The Council had seen plenty of species rise, but they had never seen one refuse to break. The chamber was silent. Admiral Jirak's mandibles twitched in irritation. This was supposed to be simple, he growled. Councillor Valek, an elder of the Crown Dominion, shifted uncomfortably. They should have reached their limit by now. Ush, he muttered. They all turned toward the holoscreen. A human fleet was maneuvering in a live exercise. The simulation was deliberately rigged against them. Outnumbered, outgunned, no reinforcements. It should have been a crushing defeat. But as they watched, the humans executed a maneuver that no algorithm had predicted. The enemy force collapsed within minutes. Silence filled the room. Jirak exhaled slowly. We waited for them to break, he said. His voice was quiet. But they never did. Vahlek's claws tapped against the table. So what do we do now? The answer hung in the air, unspoken, because they already knew. There was nothing they could do. Humanity wasn't a rising empire to be contained. They were something else entirely, and whatever came next, the galaxy wasn't ready for it. The council chamber was silent. No debates, no arguments, just the crushing weight of a decision that should never have been necessary. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dictated the course of civilization. They controlled who rose, who fell, who disappeared. They had tamed warlords, toppled empires, broken species before they could become threats. But humanity was different. They didn't break. They adapted. They didn't submit. They learned, and worst of all, they were unpredictable, a true unknown, a variable that no model could account for. And so the council had two choices: contain them or destroy them. Admiral Jirak's mandibles clicked once, twice, then stilled. "We should have crushed them when we had the chance," he muttered. Valek exhaled slowly. "We never had the chance." No one spoke, because deep down they all knew the truth. It was already too late. Humanity had spread too far. They had woven themselves into the fabric of galactic civilization. An attack now wouldn't end them. It would only prove them right. Valek's voice was quiet, resigned. "We can fight them." He looked around the room. "Or we can stand beside them." A long silence. Then, at last, a single nod. The ultimate decision had been made, and the galaxy would never be the same. They used to whisper about the Carrick warlords, about the Zulath Imperium and their planet-breaking fleets, about the silent terror of the Vrex Hive, a swarm. That devoured entire civilizations. But those myths were fading. Now, in the shadowed corners of the galaxy, the only whispers that remained were about them. The humans. They had been underestimated, mocked, dismissed as a species of soft-bodied primitives with too much ambition and too little sense. Now they were a force. Not because they were the strongest nor the fastest, nor even the most advanced, but because nothing could stop them. Historians would later argue about the exact moment everything changed. Some would point to the moment the Council realized they couldn't control humanity. Others would claim it was when the first alien armada turned away from Earth, unwilling to provoke a war that none could afford to lose. But those who were there, who saw the fear in the eyes of the Council's greatest minds, knew the truth. There was no war, because there was no winning. Destroying humanity would have cost too much. Fighting them would have shattered the galaxy itself. So the war never came. Instead, the great powers of the universe made an unspoken choice. They did what all civilizations do when faced with something they cannot conquer. They turned them into legend. It started with hushed warnings. Never challenge a human, never corner one, never think you have the upper hand, because that's when they're at their most dangerous. But over time, the warnings became stories. Stories became myths. And myths, they became gospel. Tales of human resilience spread across the stars. Entire species told their young about the creatures who refused to break, who turned every defeat into a lesson and every setback into a victory. Some feared them, some admired them, but all of them respected them, because by the time the galaxy realized what humanity had become, they were already unstoppable. Centuries later, long after the Galactic Council had crumbled, after empires had risen and fallen, one last record remained, a battered data log recovered from a long-dead world. It was old, corrupted by time, but the final entry was still clear. They were not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most advanced, and yet they survived us all, because humans don't stop. Not for war, not for fear, not even for death. They endure. And that is why they won.